Everybody, if you could move on over here, the sooner you get here, the sooner you eat. I see some people eating. You're not supposed to be eating. You're supposed to be fasting. Okay, everybody, as soon as you can get here, come on over. Yeah, what? Yeah. Oh, top 3 winners. Okay. Jenny. Okay, everybody, please come on over. Hi. How are you? Good. Kelly. All right. Do you want to do these? Do you want to do them? Yeah. Do you want to do them? Everybody, please come on over. As you sit down, you're going to learn something. So if you want to expand your brain with information, which is the goal of this event, is to work your body, work your brain. And first of all, Sandy Gleistein, who produced this event, executive producer, is going to tell you who won, who raised the most money.
Hi, guys. Thank you for being here. And it looks like you had a great workout. As you know, our goal is to raise money, and we sure have, thanks to your efforts. So we are very excited to announce the top 3 winners for Los Angeles today. But we don't want you to be discouraged because you can still raise money throughout the rest of the month. So today's winners, and you all get a good prize, so make sure to see either me or Aaron or Beverly on your way out. But the number 3 winner is the fabulous Jenny Ivanova. Hey, Jenny! Who raised a $9,085. 10,000. Oh, you made it to 10. Oh, my God. And then our very good friend and loyal supporter, Suzanne Todd, who got to the big 10,898. And then where is Beth Chilcutt? Beth. All right. Beth is a very special person. She's part of the Equinox family. She also, sadly, is part of the Alzheimer's family, having lost her wonderful, beautiful husband, Jeff, in March. But she has been here and so supportive of us. And she has raised $14,568.
Okay, everybody over there that's eating and drinking, could you come on over here because you're going to hear from the best in the country. If you could all come over and take a seat. This is a unique part of these Move for Minds events. Our goal, how about Amy Dixon, who did that class, your teacher? I mean, I want to thank her again. We have spent really the better part of a year developing that class, working on that class. All the Equinox teachers have been versed in that class, so it's going to be going on throughout the month of June. Metcon M, train your body, train your brain. I hope it made you sweat. I hope it made you think. And I hope it made you think about the connection between your body and your brain, which is the focus of this event. Yes, raise money, but I always say most important, inform you. And if every person in this group and every person joining us on Facebook went out and just shared the information, we would change the numbers of people who get Alzheimer's. So please leave here today remembering one thing, just one thing from each of these people on this panel. If you could just take away one thing from each of them, you'll get a gold star, and you can change somebody's life with the information you get. My great friend, Dr. Richard Isaacson, who I've worked with, who we fund, has the Alzheimer's Prevention Clinic in New York at Cornell, while really changing the trajectory of Alzheimer's, and particularly looking at women. Dr. Ruth Benca, who we also partner with at UCI Irvine, also an incredible expert on the role of sleep, women, estrogen, and the brain. There you go. My great friend, Marcia Gay Harden, who has just written a beautiful book over here that you can get, who is a daughter of Alzheimer's, is going to talk to us about caregiving, what we need to know if we end up one of the 15 million caregivers in this country for someone with Alzheimer's and dementia, not to mention 30 other million caregivers of other people, special needs children, people with ALS, Parkinson's, you name it. She's going to talk about caregiving. My great friend, Bob Roth, who is from the David Lynch Foundation. We do a lot together. It's going to talk about the importance of meditation on the brain. And Kelly LeVeque, who's a great friend and also an architect of change in this space, talking about nutrition. Nutrition affects your brain. And so I want to thank them for coming here to inform you, inspire you, and get you mad enough that you will go out and pass on this information and be a reporter. Everybody here is a journalist, so welcome. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm Maria, and I do this for a living, so let me start. At all the other cities, people go, wow, you actually know how to moderate. I said, if I'm 40 years being a journalist and I can't moderate, we're in trouble. Richard, I want you to tell people what is exciting to you today that you didn't know a year ago about women, Alzheimer's, and their brains.
Well, Maria, there we go. Hello? Okay. Maria, well, you read my mind, so that was good. So your brain's working well. In the last year, the amount of things that I've learned, not only about Alzheimer's disease, but specifically women and Alzheimer's, I could literally talk for the next 2 hours, probably. And
he'll be here signing his book, so you can talk to him.
Great. So the women's Alzheimer's movement, actually, Maria, you're going to get credit first. Maria, you actually got me to think differently about the brain, because I know this sounds like straightforward, but women's and men's brains, they're different. Well, why did we never look at women's versus men's brains differently in our data sets, in our clinics, in our cohort? And in the person sitting in front of me, I kind of use this one-size-fits-all approach. Maria, thank you. You've improved the way I can care for patients. And all of you out there that have funded some work that we did have actually changed the way that I understand how a woman's brains work. And what we've learned in the last year is that there's this change called the menopause transition, right? And sometime around maybe late 40s, early 50s, up through the late 50s, early 60s, there's a change in the woman's brain. And what we're realizing is that the energy in the brain changes, and what we can find is we can look at the brain and we can now understand the critical window of opportunity. So what do I mean by that? Alzheimer's disease is a tough condition, but we can make changes in the brain. We can make changes in our lifestyle. We can make changes in what we eat, the vitamins we take, the medicines we take. And different women with different brains at different ages may need to do different things. So the key thing that we've learned is that there is not a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to managing Alzheimer's risk. Now, certain people can do everything right and still get Alzheimer's. I get that. My Uncle Bob did everything right. He still got Alzheimer's. But my dad's cousin Charlotte, well, she may have staved it off a little bit. And what we're trying to learn is that certain people, certain women, as their brains change with age through the menopause, we can do new things. And we're starting new trials now. We're really understanding things. The other thing that you guys have taught me through the funding that you guys raised is that the tests that we do on women versus men need to be different. So what do I mean by that? This is completely new to me. But the cognitive tests that we use on everybody work differently in men versus women. I didn't know that. And thanks to your funding, we've learned this. So actually, we can detect change by using certain tests in women. Other tests need to be used in men. And in the past, we've had a lot of failures in Alzheimer's disease. Well, we were using the wrong tools. We're using the same tests on everybody. Going forward, we're going to use new tools specifically for women versus other tools specifically for men. We're going to separate out the groups, and we're going to learn what may work in men versus women. And that's really where we're at now.
So that is revolutionary. I want you to understand what you've done. That is revolutionary. So if you ever, I went around the country and talked to really smart neurologists like Richard and everywhere, and nobody was looking at women's brains. Nobody. So what you are doing, what the Women's Alzheimer's Movement, what Move for Minds is doing, is funding for the first time research into what is the difference. And as I always say, this is smart, not sexist, because the information that we find will change the future for all minds. So this is really important to understand that what we are doing is we're going where the majority of cases are, and we're getting information. So Ruth, I want you to talk about, this has been a tough week, hearing about Kate Spade, hearing about Anthony Bourdain, trying to talk about mental health, brain health, and the effect of social isolation, the effect of lack of sleep on the brain. I talked to Bob last night, and he said he's dealing with a lot of people who have sleep issues, who have mental health issues, who contemplate suicide, who don't understand their brain. Tell people, what is the effect on the brain of lack of sleep and what they can do about it?
Well, that's such an important question, Maria. And actually, what we're now starting to understand is that sleep problems are very predictive of suicidal behavior. And one of the problems with suicide, particularly because people who are depressed and thinking about suicide usually don't reach out. I mean, when we're depressed, we feel hopeless, we become isolated, we don't necessarily show signs, but what we're starting to understand now is that people who have insomnia and difficulty sleeping are at greater risk for suicide. And we've just been finishing some studies looking at people with depression and suicidal ideation and finding that there are signals that those who have more sleep problems, even for controlling for how depressed they are more suicidal. And this gives us an opportunity not only to intervene, but also to help us identify people. So sometimes the people around you who are suicidal may not talk about it, and even if you ask them, they say they're doing fine, but we can observe behaviors and see that people who may be changing how they sleep, how active they are during the day, other things like that could be a warning sign for us.
So I haven't met a woman who's in her 30s, 40s, or 50s who doesn't say, I'm having trouble with sleep. And so Richard's also talking, and I'm really glad to hear that you guys, as a result of Move for Minds, are thinking of developing a brain health clinic out here in California, the first of its kind. But really, the question, which is unbelievable, he has an Alzheimer's prevention clinic in New York, and the wait is several years to get in, and it's mainly 20, 30, and 40-year-olds. And this is the message we're trying to get out, because your brain, as I said, starts changing at the age of 30. But you talk about personalized precision medicine, women and hormones. Women can't sleep when estrogen drains from their brain. Women have difficulty sleeping. Very controversial about hormones, very controversial about people taking sleep medication. Can you both address that, if there are people out there struggling with sleep, struggling with depression, and struggling with their hormones?
Well, to start, about 40 to 60% of women who are going through menopause will have significant sleep problems. So this is a really common problem. It's often related to vasomotor symptoms, hot flashes, but can occur even in the absence of that. I think there's some evidence that particularly women who have a lot of hot flashes, that estrogen replacement may be helpful for their sleep, and I certainly see patients for whom that's the case. But that's a bit controversial, and there are some women who shouldn't take hormone replacement therapy because of other risks. But the other thing we know is that there are many treatments for sleep problems, and particularly for insomnia, and one of the most important ones is what we call cognitive behavioral therapy, to address behaviors that tend to make sleep worse or can help them improve, and exercise is a big one, so I'm glad you're all going to sleep well tonight, I hope. But another one is, even just addressing things like stress and worry, meditation effects, and I think maybe Bob's going to talk a little bit about that. So we don't necessarily need to use medications, and the first-line treatments we recommend really are behavioral ones, and those are some of the ones that we're going to be employing in our new clinic at UCI.
So let me move to Bob, because we are talking, we talked about exercise up there, trying to get you to think while you're actually moving. People don't connect depression so often, movement, exercise, Alzheimer's, the role of meditation. Bob, tell us what we need to know about meditation, and for a lot of people who think they're very busy, A-type people, how they can learn meditation. Because I was that way, and he taught me to meditate. So if I can learn to meditate, anybody can learn to meditate. Bob Roth.
First,
just tell them about meditation.
Maria Shriver.
Bob, tell them about meditation.
Have to do it.
Okay, I'm in charge.
When we, I have the mic. When we think of exercise, when we think of health and prevention, most people think of and behavioral change. I have to eat well, and I have to exercise, and that's addressing health from the neck down. And this is a little 3-pound brain that basically runs the show. And for years and years and decades, no one really took seriously the whole idea of meditation. It was just weird or sect or something strange. It was bad branding, you could say. But fortunately, in the most recently, in recent years, with the influx of some very serious peer-reviewed studies, that we now understand that there are certain meditations that produce very significant effects in the way our brain functions, and therefore the way our cardiovascular system functions, our limbic system functions, our digestive system functions, and has a profound effect on the risk factors for Alzheimer's. For example, two in particular, cardiovascular disease. Well, if we're only trying to address heart health by just exercise and diet, then we're missing this 3-pound influencer. And there's enough research now that's been done on different types of meditation. I teach transcendental meditation, but others, that shows a significant reduction in high blood pressure, cholesterol, bad cholesterol, risk factors for stroke that you don't even see often in medication. There's also a reduction in cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone that floods the hippocampus, which is our memory center, and damages the hippocampus. And obviously, over time, that has a significant effect for Alzheimer's. So, and I just read an article just recently, I have 2 last points, recently, that said anxiety in older people is a precursor or a sign of Alzheimer's. Well, that anxiety didn't just start yesterday, and high blood pressure didn't just start yesterday, and high cortisol, these things are going on over time. And we talked about this at the last meeting, is that what I believe what you're going to hear today is not a luxury. Oh, that's when I turn, older. It's right now. It's right now the kinds of changes you're going to hear from everybody here on this stage, because of Maria, that are going to impact our lives very profoundly.
Bob, you were saying in New York that the things that we're talking about today, understanding sleep, and that clears plaques and tangles, that clears your brain. Looking at the brain, looking at estrogen as a neuroprotector, or thinking about your brain, thinking about meditation, that these are non-negotiable starting in your 20s.
Right now, I mean, I had a foundation that's brought TM to over 1 million children for free. Inner cities in the U.S. and all over the world. And that's where it really has to begin. That's true prevention, I think everyone would recognize, because you're already seeing kids with, So I just think now is the time for all of us. And what is that great statement? If you don't change where you're going, you're going to end up exactly where you're headed. So we're all headed in that direction. The trajectory is not healthy. So exercise is important. Diet is important. Meditation, properly understood and practiced, essential. I believe it's the missing component. And when we address that, we're going to address a lot of the issues that we face. Suicidal ideation, all these different things. So thank you.
So since we don't, at the moment, have a cure, we don't have a little pill to prevent Alzheimer's, everything that we're talking about up here is the best information, the most up-to-date, the thing that you can do today to at least keep your brain healthy, to at least perhaps delay it 2 years, 3 years. And also for those of you who might have a parent in a facility, please check the diets in those facilities. Please check the diets of your parents. Kelly, we have spoken a lot about what we eat and how that affects our thinking, how that affects brain fog, how that affects emotion. We have to begin to look at food as one of the best tools we have to prevent Alzheimer's. What are you learning, and what can you share today that you didn't know, and you're in this space, a year ago, about food in the brain?
Well, I was quite surprised at the rates of Alzheimer's for pre-diabetics and diabetic patients. So what we're seeing is that pre-diabetic blood sugar numbers on a regular blood panel with your doctor are actually doubling your chances of Alzheimer's and brain degenerative diseases. So it starts before you get the diagnosis for pre-diabetes and diabetes, and it starts on your plate. It starts with balancing your blood sugar, and that's really, really important. It's something I preach to my clients all the time because we are truly made up of the food that we're eating. So from the healthy proteins, essential amino acids, healthy fats, those good fatty acids like the anti-inflammatory omega-3s that you would find in salmon, and if you're a vegetarian, I would definitely consider taking an algae-based omega-3 is just a phenomenal way to help to balance your blood sugar. So instead of thinking about an eat and do not eat list, because I think that can be a little bit stressful, it's really thinking about how can you elongate your blood sugar curve with real whole foods. So healthy proteins, healthy fats, and then fiber and vegetables on your plate. And that's just, I think God's natural way of helping us balance our blood sugar. And, when it comes to processed foods and sugars, those are the things that really take our blood sugar up. And if you have any recent blood tests, I would definitely look at your glucose numbers, because something that wouldn't be flagged as prediabetes is still leading you down the road to brain degeneration.
That's a big thing. Go ahead. Yeah.
So how many people in here know your weight? Great. Okay. How many people in here know your cholesterol? Okay, a little less hands. How many people in here know your fasting blood sugar? Okay. What about your hemoglobin A1C? Okay. What about your homocysteine? You see all these words coming out of my... Oh, there we go. Thanks, Natalie. That's my girl.
We only know that because we go there.
So here's the key. Know your numbers. Anyone today, can make a brain healthy choice, but you have to know your numbers, so you need to know what you need to change. If your blood sugar is a little bit high, well, that little bit is probably the thing that's going to cause the problem. I'm going to be working on finishing a paper this weekend funded by the Women's Alzheimer's Movement, so thanks again, where there's a whole section that says those normal reference ranges, I think they're wrong.
Absolutely.
When it comes to brain health, they're wrong. Borderline diabetes, borderline high blood pressure, borderline high cholesterol, it's like pressing the fast forward button to Alzheimer's. And we don't want to do that.
Repeat that. That is so important. Yep. What we knew 2 years ago, 3 years ago, what the general public knows is wrong. Yep. Is wrong. Nobody has been looking at women's health. That's what makes me angry. Nobody has studied. It hasn't been funded. We don't know. And what we are learning is what we knew, what we thought we knew was wrong. So repeat that again. What should the people learn today, whether they're joining us online or in this room?
So know your numbers. Know your blood pressure. Know your fasting pulse rate.
Write it down if you have to.
Know your fasting blood sugar. Know your cholesterol, the good cholesterol, the bad cholesterol. Know your hemoglobin A1C. I know it's a long word, but know it. Know your homocysteine. Know all of these different things and talk to your doctor. Now, your doctor may not know some of this stuff for better or for worse, but they're learning. They're going to learn, and you can help them learn.
And one of the things we're all learning is how all of these things are tied together. And so just to follow up on what Kelly and Richard said, one of the things that you can do that's really important to help lower your blood glucose level is to get enough sleep. Because when you have sleep deprivation or insomnia, and this is really important for women because women are far more likely to have insomnia than men, that's going to raise your fasting blood sugar.
So, Marcia, so many women and so many people end up caregivers in this country, which is a 24-hour-a-day job. So many women and men are parenting, they're caregiving, they're providing, they're trying to do their best, and they are stressed out doing it. You've been a caregiver. You've been a caregiver in the same place as your mother, and you've been a caregiver from afar. You've navigated sibling relationships. What's the most important thing you've learned from being a caregiver?
Thanks, Maria. I have a couple things to say, 3 important things to say. The first one is thank you for being here, and don't underestimate the power of your voice. Unlike AIDS, unlike cancer, as Maria's pointed out, there are no survivors of Alzheimer's. And we want this generation to have the first survivor of Alzheimer's and all survivors of Alzheimer's. So, unlike AIDS and unlike cancer, the people who are fighting it and the people who are surviving it are the spokespeople for it. So we need to take a page out of those books about how we can galvanize, because we are the voices for our parents suffering from Alzheimer's or our loved ones. We are the voices. There are very few. Maria brings them to the forefront. People who have it, who are speaking out, mostly they can't speak out because they don't know what they have. They don't remember what they have. That's my mom. I say, Mom, we wrote a book and it's going to help Alzheimer's, or we're doing this thing with Maria. And she goes, that's nice for those people. And you're like, oh, Mom, it's you too, but she doesn't know. So first of all, thank you for being here. And the power of your voice, the power of our voices together is what's going to get us the first survivor through research and funding. The second thing is get your house in order. And that's the ugly conversation. If you're a caregiver and you have siblings, it's not an easy road to navigate because you're trying to figure out what to do for a parent who can't speak for themselves. And anybody who's ever been through a holiday or Christmas already knows it can be a shit festival on some level. People trying to figure out what you should have for dinner. For God's sake, no, Mom wouldn't want that. Mom would want this. Well, when they can't speak for themselves about how they want to live and how they want to die, that's when you have to be brave and come forward with the really strong questions. If you don't have a will, get a will. If they don't have a will, get them a will. Ask them those questions. I mean, simple questions like, do they want to be cremated? Where do they want to be buried? It's torn up many, many families, and I think Alzheimer's is a family disease. It can be divisive for the siblings. It either brings out the best or the worst. So the more conversations you can have with the Alzheimer's patient while they can remember and dictate and understand their own journey, you give them the power to be in charge of their journey, and that's really, really important. So then you can carry it out with your siblings and say, this is what Mom or Dad wanted. Look, they said so right here. And then you can, with medical people, make the medical decisions, but at least you can carry out to the best of your ability those particular wishes. And so getting your house in order has to do with a lot of things, because the third thing I was going to say was clean out the kitchen, and everybody's already talked about that. But, like really, really simple things. Go to your pantry, clean it out, get rid of all the stuff in there, the gluten, the this. Read those books, the Brain Rules and all those books that talk about it. They say gluten is not a good friend. Sugar is not a good friend. If you sleep with somebody who snores and you don't sleep all night, figure it out. Those are really, really, your life is your practical life. Every step you take is your practical life. And so you don't think about, someone else isn't getting good sleep. This is your husband. You love them. But if they snore, you're not sleeping very well either. So you have to figure those things out. And I know it sounds like a weird thing to say, but the quality of your sleep is really important. So get your house in order. Don't underestimate the power of your own voice, and clean out your kitchen.
And I think that's really important. As I said, my dad had Alzheimer's, and my brothers and I developed a weekly phone call. And we were all on the phone together, and we took turns, and we got comfortable with what pushed each other's buttons. We actually gave assignments to one another. As I said, 4 brothers said, well, you'll do it all. I said, no, I won't. And you need to step up, and they did. And so this is, as Marcia was saying, a family affair. Many people doing it from afar. We need an educated caregiving task force. Many people doing this, as Franny said. And I want to mention, Patrick, my son, brought up that I should mention her company. It's called Magic Pants. I wear them all the time. They lift your butt up. They're tight, they're good. Nothing's happening, but they really make you look good. So I would advertise, get Franny's Magic Pants. They come in black and they're tight. So, they're good. So, but I think, it's important to, as Marcia was saying, to get your house in order. We also put out on the Women's Alzheimer's Movement things you should know about the economics of having a loved one with Alzheimer's. It's super expensive. It is bankrupting families, millions and millions of families around the country, which is why I say this is also a political issue. Vote for people who want to invest in NIH funding. Vote for people who want to invest, whether it's cancer, Alzheimer's, AIDS, whatever it is. We need political leaders who understand that the funding for these diseases is really expensive, and you have to prioritize it. Also, please vote for people who talk about caregiving, talk about the millions of Americans who are caregiving 24/7, political issue. I've testified under this president who wanted to cut NIH funding. I testified. This is a bipartisan issue. Please vote for leaders who see this as a political issue. Please work for companies. Bring it to your company's attention. Being a part of clinical trials, it's a national service. Make your company give you time off, paid time off to be part of a clinical trial. Stress. Okay, I'm probably stressing them out. With all the things they have to do. They have to vote for people who make this a priority. They have to get their house in order. And health, well, this is a huge health insurance. This is a huge health issue. Women's health issue. Don't get me started. Right. Vote for people who believe in health insurance. Yeah. So, Bob, you wanted to talk about the effect of stress, and then we're going to open it up to the audience.
Well, I just think that going back to what everybody's been talking about, the mechanics of stress, there are stressors, and those are things that we often have no control over. A parent who has Alzheimer's, a child who's sick, a loss of a job, something happens to ourselves, we get dealing with some chronic disorder. Those are the outside external stressors, but what we do have control over is our stress response, our reactivity. Is our amygdala hyper-aroused, which is the fight or flight or freeze center of the brain? Do we have high levels of cortisol, which is our anxiety, which is the stress hormone secreted by the adrenals? Those things, what you're hearing about today, those are the things that we can have control over. Non-medicinal. We can do these basic things that will make our role as a caregiver far more effective and far less stressful. It will also allow us to deal with things that are happening to ourselves. I teach a lot of people who are dealing with chronic disease, and anxiety undermines the immune system. It exacerbates the symptoms. So I would just make that point again. My job here is to just hammer home what you're hearing today is not just, okay, that was great, now let's just leave. It's really take this stuff seriously.
Does anybody, I want to open this up to questions. You all paid, you raised money to ask these experts about diet, about estrogen, about hormones, about food, about caregiving. If you have a question, bring it on.
For the doctor from New York.
Isaacson.
Dr. Isaacson, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the aggressive early onset and what you're seeing versus a more traditional late stage Alzheimer's?
Sure. So the question, can everybody hear me? Okay. So the question is kind of talk a little bit about early onset Alzheimer's disease, and the word you used was aggressive because oftentimes early onset disease is more aggressive versus the late onset Alzheimer's. So I guess what I would say is you can take many different roads to Alzheimer's disease, and what we've learned in the last year is that women may be on, in some ways, the express lane for a variety of reasons. We want to get them off. You could be on the diabetes road, like you mentioned. You can be on the lack of sleep road. You can be on multiple roads, or you could be on the genetic road. And there's also an interaction between one's lifestyle and genetics, so that gets even more confusing. But early onset Alzheimer's disease, most of the time, almost invariably, is usually caused by a gene that's causing not just the fast forwarding, but literally the zooming towards Alzheimer's. And early onset cases are not only among the saddest because people are young and in the prime of their lives, but they're also the more aggressive forms. So early onset Alzheimer's is in some ways a little bit of a different disease than late onset. Late onset Alzheimer's is very common. As I'm sure, I have 4 family members with Alzheimer's. I know most of us in here have been affected. Late onset Alzheimer's is very different. And lifestyle changes, managing risk factors like high cholesterol, diabetes, etc., those are some of the most impactful things that I believe, and based on our data, show that we can try to get people off the road. So I would say they're different diseases, and I would say we need more research for both.
But what he's also saying is that women are on the expressway because of the way we are living our lives, because of the stress, because of the processed foods, because of the lack of sleep. And also women don't often make the connection between being perimenopausal. They think that's all physical changes, and we're trying to get the message out that that's actually your brain changing. Your body is following your brain. Question? Yeah.
Thank you all for the work that you're doing. My mother has a rare dementia, cortical basal degeneration, and I'd love to hear from the doctors on the panel about genetic studies. I've been researching the family line. To the best of my knowledge, she's a one-off. She's a one-off. But I can't find any information about genetic studies that aren't just early onset Alzheimer's.
Well, about 70% of all cases of dementia are usually caused by Alzheimer's. Then the other 30% is a mixed bag, from vascular to Lewy body to frontotemporal. And one of the more rare cases, one of the more rare situations, and it's a real tough condition, is something called cortical basal ganglionic degeneration. What I recommend for people that are affected by these kind of rare, rare dementia is one thing, but then you have even more rare. There are certain centers throughout the country. There's one center in Boston, there's one center in Philadelphia that specializes in rare dementias. And the best advice that I would give, because you can go to a general neurologist who wouldn't really be able to help as much, try to find an academic medical center that has someone that's doing that specific research. Rare diseases need to have a champion, and you need to really find that one person. It's really hard.
I just want to, Kelly, can you very quickly address intermittent fasting, since I've talked about that, and how much of a fast should people be on for their brain?
Sure. So when it comes to genetic predisposition to Alzheimer's, there are studies that suggest that a 14 to 16-hour fast is very helpful. When working with clients, when I'm talking about a fast, I'm talking about when you finish dinner to when you have breakfast. Whenever I work with clients, I always say, wake up, wait a few hours to eat breakfast, and then eat dinner like my grandma. 5 p.m. at night if you can, or 6, because not only will that allow for that meal, that is dinner, to be digested and your blood sugar to go up and come back down, but you're redirecting blood flow to digestion when you eat a big meal right before bed. And not only will you wake up with higher blood sugar, but that blood flow should actually be supporting your lymphatic system, which is that washing of the brain while you sleep, which is why sleep is great and keeping your blood sugar down is great. So intermittent fasting is not only a great way to increase insulin sensitivity so that your muscles suck up sugar a little bit quicker, but it really supports bringing those blood sugar levels down. So when you think about having elevated blood sugar, even before a diagnosis of prediabetes, these are just great tips. Maybe every Sunday you decide to have an early Sunday dinner and then a late Monday breakfast. Just even once a week can really support your brain to cleanse, your blood sugar to come back down. So I think intermittent fasting is a phenomenal tool. I look at everything like a tool. Meditation is a tool for bringing cortisol down. Sleep also a tool for bringing down elevated blood sugar. So just think about all these little tools as ways to support your body and your brain. And when it comes to processed foods, even just taking one meal off where you're not having something super starchy or processed with a label on it can be a great step in the right direction.
Question?
Yes. Yeah, so obviously, at least the most recent research I saw or data I saw is that caregivers are something like 2/3 more likely to become Alzheimer's patients themselves. And so it's kind of a duplicated effect in that most caregivers are women, so it doubles up as a women's health issue. How do you think we can raise awareness that caring for an Alzheimer's patient radically, along with all these other things, makes you more likely to get Alzheimer's itself? And how can we push back against that?
I haven't heard that figure, that if you're actually a caregiver for someone with Alzheimer's or other, the studies show that you can get sicker because you don't care for your health.
Yeah.
There's no specific science that I'm aware of that says you're more likely to get Alzheimer's, but you are less likely to sleep, to eat properly, to care for yourself, to exercise, right? So prioritizing your brain is important. And in terms of how do we get more people to focus on this is a political issue. This is a professional issue, and this is a personal issue. And so every single person in here is a reporter. Every single person in here has a Facebook page, has a social media thing. You can use this as much as people talk about, all kinds of inconsequential stuff. You can actually use your social media to talk about things that actually can change the news cycle. Do you want to address that at all? Is there any statistics that I'm unaware of?
No, I don't know the statistics either, but what you're saying makes sense. The caregivers sleep with the Alzheimer's patient. If it's 24/7, they're under continual stress. Hopefully they're eating well if you help them clean out the kitchen the right way. But I think just what Maria and everyone else is saying, raise your voice, raise your voice, raise your voice. That's why I say when you looked at the AIDS and the cancer community, they were never quiet because there was no room to be quiet. Because it's a national health crisis, I think it's the crime of the century. I think Alzheimer's is the crime of the century. So just raise your voices.
I would also just address you to the conversation we did in New York with Dan Smith, whose wife B. Smith was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It was she's about 50, and it's also more prevalent, I might add, in the African American community, in the Latino community. So we do a lot to try to branch out into other communities with this message. But he talked really powerfully in New York about what it's like to be with someone who's losing their mind, and how he lost his own mind, and how he lost everything, and how he found his way back. It's a really quite powerful conversation. There was another question over here. Go ahead.
Yep. Hey, how you doing? Fantastic discussion. Thank you very much for having us. The fasting makes perfect sense. Nobody really talks about, and the diet and fasting, I get all that. Nobody really talks about how I've read studies about a little bit minor calorie deprivation being, healthy, extending your life. Will that help? Because for me, I don't so much worry about the 6 o'clock thing. I kind of worry about, I eat 1,800 calories a day, and I just try to keep it at that. Which is not a lot, but I feel like it's a little bit of a deprivation. Does that help? Have you done any studies on just basic calories per day as opposed to fasting or with fasting?
Yeah, most of the calorie deprivation and research in that space is coming out of USC by Dr. Longo. So he's a great resource for you to look at for increasing life and longevity. But even in his research, he finds that it's really about the inputs. So if you're eating 1,800 calories worth of processed, carbohydrate-based, sugar-based foods, you're still at an increased risk of elevated glucose, elevated insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and all of the rest. So you see a lot of the programs like his fasting program, for example, when you look at the macronutrients, it actually leans higher towards fat. And you want to remember that your brain is more than half fat, right? It's a sponge of beautiful fat, and the fats you want to be eating are those healthy anti-inflammatory fats, the omega-3s, the olive oils that are rich in, those fat-rich phytochemicals. But I definitely think that keeping your portion sizes and your calories maybe to your resting metabolic rate or something along those lines is probably supporting you and keeping your blood sugar a little more balanced. And just look at the inputs, look at those macronutrients, use fasting as a tool, make sure you're not overeating. Those are, that's when we get that compounding blood sugar and an inability to clear it.
And just to follow up, there's a study from the Mayo Clinic that looked at specifically is there a magic number or a magic cutoff? And again, I don't think there's a one size fits all approach to Alzheimer's disease, prevention, treatment, whatever. I think it's an individual. Someone who's going to be very active may need more calories. In this one study from the Mayo Clinic published a few years ago, 2,100 calories was the magic number cutoff. Where if people ate less than 2,100 calories a day over their life course, they had half the likelihood of converting to dementia from mild cognitive impairment, something like that.
And just to add, for people who are trying to restrict the number of calories they're eating to these healthy amounts, another a good thing to do is make sure you're getting enough sleep, because what we find is that when people get insufficient amounts of sleep, all the hormones that increase your appetite increase, the reward centers for food in your brain get kind of cranked up, and people who don't sleep enough tend to have a lot of trouble stopping eating after dinner. And it's that after dinner snacking which is putting on the pounds, and people go after more high reward foods which are not the good ones for you. We don't go after the salads and carrot sticks at night. So getting enough sleep is a really helpful thing when you're trying to eat better.
Okay. I feel shame. Okay. Go ahead.
It's on. Okay. Hi. Everything that you guys are talking about is so vital, and I wanted to ask you if you could address breathing, because I feel like stress and anxiety prevents people. It it diminishes our breath. And I feel that what I had learned as a young person from my mother, actually, who lived till 98, was breathing and deep breathing regularly every day, every minute, oxygenates the blood and the brain, and that when you are holding your breath or have shallow breathing, you are really building up toxins just by that very thing. So I just wanted to hear
Great
something.
question. And that brings me to this app that we have created with Bob, which is about breathing in and out, which is about meditation, which has been done specifically to address this. Bob?
No, I mean, you just said it exactly. When we're anxious, we have short breaths. We breathe in through our mouth, and we don't feed the brain. And that's why there's certain types of pranayama or certain types of breathing that consciously bring the air up into your head, and in your brain, within a few moments, you can have a settling effect. I think, again, just to go back to meditation, and again, the word meditation is so vague, so abstract. I don't know what to do. Where do I start? Well, you can go online. I wrote a book, but you can go online and you can look up meditation, but you should look that it has research, and you should look that it may be that you have your own teacher. And the last thing I want to point out here is that sitting here listening to all of you, it can be very overwhelming, all the things I have to do. And I got to start doing this, and I got to start breathing like this, and I got to start eating like that, and I got to get a lot of sleep, but I can't get a lot of sleep, but I got to get a lot of sleep. And the thing is, you pull one leg on a table, and all the other three come along. You don't have to overwhelm yourself, but you start with the practice. You start with it, and you have persistence and conviction. I was told once by a wise person, the key to success when you have a good idea is conviction, because it's a deep, vertical thing. I believe in this. My life is important. My family's life is important. This relationship is important. My health is important. So conviction, and then it's conviction over time, persistence. One or the other, you don't have it. But you don't have to be overwhelmed by all of this. I've been meditating, it's going to sound crazy, for almost 50 years, and I'm 191. No. I am almost 68. And someone said to me once, they said, how could you have meditated 50 years, twice a day? And I said, I've been brushing my teeth longer than that. It just becomes a habit. And all these things, once they're a habit, it's very simple to do.
I just want to add something about breathing, though, that's important for women. And that is the time that you're at greatest risk of not breathing well is if you're asleep and you have sleep apnea. And we think of sleep apnea as a man's disease associated with snoring, but it is becoming increasingly common in women, and we've shown that the rates of sleep apnea go up as you approach perimenopause and postmenopause. And a lot of women fail to get diagnosed from this disorder, and what that does is when you stop breathing at night, your brain doesn't get oxygen. We know that apnea is a big risk factor for Alzheimer's, and it also causes you to wake up and get insufficient sleep, and it increases brain inflammation.
Really quickly, starting with you, Marcia, final thought for everybody.
I'm going to go on this same one about breathing. As an actor, we know you have to breathe, so you have to connect your voice. And when you're connected to your voice, you're connected to your emotion. And if you're not connected to your emotion, you're typically more anxious and not healthy. So I'll go with the breathing. You'll find if somebody, if you're feeling badly, and you're kind of talking up here, because that's where you're talking from, because you're not connected down there. So you have to connect down there, be resonant, and then you'll find sometimes if somebody's like, how are you doing? And you're resonant, you're like, oh, I'm fine. But because you just haven't connected to yourself for so long. So breathe deeply and connect yourself.
I just want to follow up. All these health behaviors we're talking about all the good things you can do to take better care of yourself and your brain. And I want to follow up on what Bob said, is you don't have to be thinking about doing all of them at once, because the beautiful thing is every one of them that you do is going to pull the others along. If you exercise more, you're going to eat better, you're going to sleep better. If you sleep better, you're going to eat better, and so on. They all interact, so that's the beauty of it.
One more result that I forgot to mention earlier. When we looked at so we run an Alzheimer's prevention clinic where we give people targeted suggestions, whether it's exercise, diet, taking a specific vitamin, whatever it is. We put people on multiple plans, 20 things, 30 things, do the best you can, choose. When we looked at the individual groups at these multimodal interventions, do you know who it works best in? Imagine that women between the ages of 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. That was our most responsive group. So if we have any women in the room in their 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s.
Well, what about women? Yeah, what about women after 50?
After 55, it gets confusing. Certain women respond really well. Other women respond differently.
Go ahead. What do you want to say? Oh, my God.
I shouldn't have been on. Great.
Oh, my God. Why am I funding you?
Well,
What's wrong with you?
Well, we need more research for those women. That's the next phase. Next year.
He has a book over there. Okay, final thing. Oh, my God. Oh, my God, what's wrong with you?
I'm getting there. Next year. We'll need one more year.
You're on a little boat and you're in the middle of the ocean, and all of a sudden you get these giant waves. And you could think the whole ocean is in upheaval. But if you did a cross-section of the ocean out there, you'd realize that you got these little 30, 40, 50-foot waves, but the ocean in reality is a mile deep. And while the surface of the ocean can be turbulent by its nature, the depth of the ocean by its nature is pretty darn silent. And the mind, by analogy, is the same. We have the surface, gotta, monkey mind, monkey mind, monkey mind. There are certain meditations that attempt to control the monkey mind. They have their own value. There's other meditations that give access to that silence within. There are many tools in a toolbox. Don't think, oh, I do this meditation so I don't have to do that, or I do that technique, I don't have to look at this. We want to equip ourselves and our families with all the tools we need to be very, very healthy.
So I'll just give you a couple tips that I give my clients. Obviously, the Sunday night early dinner is a phenomenal way to tap your toe in the water of intermittent fasting. The second would be make sure that you're not having too many net carbohydrates. So a lot of people will look at just sugar, but to understand what's turning to blood sugar and elevating that blood sugar, a net carbohydrate is total carbohydrates minus fiber. So if something's higher in fiber, the effect on your blood sugar is lower. So look for those higher fiber foods. A lot of times they're your whole foods, right? So a cup of broccoli might be 6 grams of carbohydrates and 4 grams of fiber. That means the net carbohydrate is 2. Its effect on your blood sugar is less than, say, a piece of bread that seems really healthy because it's whole wheat or whatever, but you look at that net carbohydrate, even something, that at your health food store, it might have, for a slice of bread, 28 grams of carbohydrates and 3 grams of fiber. So the effect on your blood sugar is 25 grams up. So you think about it like that and start to compare your foods, because that's a great little mathematical equation where you can start to compare things you buy, one bread versus another, one cracker versus another. Okay.
So I just want to reiterate that all of these people have best-selling books that are on the New York Times list, and they're going to sign them, and they're here to talk to you, to share other tips and tools. I hope you have learned a lot. I want to thank Air One. Speaking of health food stores, they are doing a lunch for you now that you have been fasting. And if you shop at any of their locations, they're rounding up throughout the whole month of June, which is Brain Awareness Month. I hope you know that you are funding research that is changing the lives of millions of people, particularly women who were not being looked at. So I want to really thank you for taking the time to raise the money, to raise your voice, to be here. I firmly believe that we are going to wipe out this disease. I firmly believe that we have the survivors within our sights. I've been at this 15 years. I work on it every single day. We are going to get this mother, and we are going to do it because of you. So thank you so much.
Maria Shriver. Maria.
Thank you.